I was just talking to someone last night about this very point regarding the future of Linux and the pipeline of new Linux users may be cut significantly down because of other ways that a user can be introduced to Linux. So instead of the traditional or classical way of getting introduced to Linux, we're going to have companies like Google getting in front of the process and making it easy for people to use Linux, but in their own environment. So you think of WSL for Windows, you think of Chromebooks, and that's going to have potentially a devastating impact or domino effect towards people eventually making their way to more traditional, less Linux desktop paradigms. We will always have people who eventually run Arch, by the way, eventually run insert your niche or Linux distro, but a good portion of that is going to be cut. The numbers are going to be cut down because people are just going to live on a Chromebook and use Linux casually on a Chromebook and WSL and not make their way to Ubuntu, Elementary, OpenSUSE, Fedora, and it's going to have an impact on the contribution pipeline potentially, because of these new Linux users get introduced. They may not make their way there to those distributions, and we already see a pattern of the kernel maintainers and developers dwindling. We see that with GNOME contributions too. We have a lot of GNOME contributions, but then the ratio between developer contributor is shrinking. So it might be this pipeline might be further strained if what you're about to listen to holds true at scale.
It might be fun to troll you. So this article is called Chromebooks Are the Perfect Place to Teach Yourself About Linux. And Richard Devine wrote this article where he talks about how he bought a Chromebook at the start of lockdown and used it to teach himself Linux. And he went into it having never used the terminal before and now actively uses the terminal in Linux quite a lot, has learnt loads, and is making a pretty decent case as far as I can see.
Cool. I am sure you could, in theory, say that 1978 Space Invaders taught Elon Musk how to develop SpaceX, but that would also be bullshit too.
Come on.
Really? I don't know. Okay, maybe this one case, this happened by accident. But I really don't believe anybody is doing this. It's very good for old Richard there. I hope he has a great time, but I just don't believe there is a single other person who has done this.
I think you're wrong. Because the beauty of Linux on a Chromebook is that it's an optional extra that you can, at least in theory, get rid of and start again without pissing around doing dual booting or even having to manage virtual machines yourself. And meanwhile, you've got a perfectly usable Chromebook with a perfectly usable browser and everything else that goes with that, plus Android apps as well from the Play Store. So I think it's a reasonable argument that Chromebooks may well be a good way for people to get into Linux. Because I know that to you, Linux is Linux on the desktop, but for the vast majority of people who use Linux, it's fucking not. It is Linux via SSH and automated Ansible and Kubernetes and whatever.
Well, it's still all those things too. I mean, it's my slew of pies, knock around places, all that. It's not been, told what you can or can't do with the OS. Look, if this works, great. I'm slightly more pessimistic about it, I think. And also, you've given money to Google and they're still spying on you. It's all evil, so that's what I say about it.